The Investing with Tom YouTube channel presents the return of Bitcoin Bro 69. Anything you hear in this video is not financial advice and is for entertainment purposes only. Please do not lose any IQ points from listening to Bitcoin Bro 69. Enjoy.
Bro, what stocks should I buy? Bro, I'm not going to tell you what stocks to buy. Bro, do you think the market's going to go down next month? Bro, I don't know. Hey bro, what do you think about Uber stock? Look man, there's some businesses I understand, some I don't, and even the ones I know inside out, I cannot tell you what their stock is going to be doing a couple of months from now. Look man, I'm sorry, but you know what they say? That's just the way it is. Ooh. Oh man. Hey guys, Tom here from the Investing with Tom YouTube channel. Welcome back to the channel. If you enjoyed today's video, hit like, hit subscribe, and that way you can see future videos as well. So today's video is all about circle of competence. And as you would have seen in that intro, I mentioned that there are a million businesses out there in the world and there's very few that I really truly understand inside out. And it's really those businesses that we should be sticking to when we're looking to make investments in the stock market. At the end of the day, we're buying businesses and we should have a pretty solid idea of how we expect those businesses to perform over the long term if our investment strategy is to buy and hold stocks for the long term. That makes a whole lot of sense. So, you know, it's something that I was listening to in a Pabrai talk that just came out last night. I'm about sort of halfway through listening to that. And the question came up around circle of competence and, you know, how do I know that this business, how do I know that I truly understand a certain business before making an investment? And what's kind of the best way to think about that? So that's something I want to get into today. Even when we understand businesses inside out, it's impossible to know what stocks are going to do in the short term. So much is market sentiment driven rather than just underlying business performance driven. And we shouldn't be making decisions based off, you know, short-term goals or anything like that. So let's get into it. Let's talk about that topic. We're going to use a great analogy that I've heard Warren Buffett mention a number of times, and I may have even mentioned this on the channel before, but I think there is no harm in bringing it up again. So let's get into the video. So the first analogy that I want to get to is Ted Williams and the science of hitting. So Ted Williams is a very famous baseball player, and you really don't have to know much about baseball to hopefully get this analogy, but Ted Williams was one of the, or even the last player to have a 400 batting average in baseball. And if you know nothing about baseball, all you need to know is that 400 is really, really, really good. And that basically refers to every time he goes out to bat, how often does he get to the first base. So that's what that batting average is all about. 400 or 0.4 is really good, so that means 40% of the time he goes to the plate to bat, he's getting to first base. So what Ted Williams came up with and his theory on the science of hitting was he split the strike zone in baseball up into 77 baseballs that kind of fit into that grid. So it is 11 wide and sort of 7 across, and you end up with 77 baseballs. And basically what he figured out was for each baseball within that grid, if he hit a ball that was pitched in each of those spots, he figured out what his batting average would be. And he found that there were certain areas in that strike zone where his batting average was really high. So if he got pitched a ball there and he swung at it, he was very, very likely to connect, bat on ball, and get to home plate, get to first base, and all those things. So that's great. And there were also sections within that strike zone where he had a much lower batting average. So if he was reaching for something in kind of the bottom right corner of the strike zone, something that wasn't like a perfect pitch for his particular batting style, he found that his batting average went down a lot. So he used this grid and he sort of memorized every single ball, every single pitch within that strike zone, and only swung at things that were a perfect pitch and that he had a high chance of kind of smacking it out of the park. So That analogy works really, really well in investing. So with baseball, the unfortunate thing for Ted Williams is that there are called strikes. So he can't just stand there all day and have pitch after pitch go by and eventually swing at one that's in the perfect spot in his strike zone. He only gets three strikes and he's out. So he can, let a couple of the wayward ones go, but eventually he has to swing at something. And that's not something that investors have to do. So we have no called strikes. We can watch pitch after pitch go by. In investing, that would be business after business. We can look into it, research it. If we can't understand the business, something doesn't make sense, the price is too high, whatever it is, we can pass. Put that in the too hard basket, or maybe we're going to keep watching it, but it's too expensive for now kind of basket. And then keep looking. So that is really a strategy that works amazingly well in investing, is focusing on just purely those perfect pitches. And for me, it takes a lot of the pressure off. So I've been mentioning very frequently in these videos lately, but I'm looking for very, very few investment ideas each year, maybe 1 or 2 per year. Over a lifetime, that's going to add up to quite a number of investments. And hopefully me being a really harsh grader with each of these businesses that come by and only selecting very specific stocks that I'm confident on, that should do wonders hopefully for my performance record over time. Time will obviously tell on that one, but that is sort of my thinking on it. So in terms of investing, we really need to focus on just a very small number of ideas. We need to understand those things inside out, and we need to focus on the things that are knowable. So that's going to be the second part of today's video, is what we should focus on and what we shouldn't focus on. The first thing is we must stick with absolute no-brainers, things right down our alley, perfect pitches, businesses we understand inside out. You don't need a spreadsheet to value them, even though I've got several videos on that. They should just be absolute no-brainers. Those are the investments I'm looking for. If I can't explain it to a 5-year-old, it's probably not a good enough idea in my books. So that's the first part of today's video, is focus on what's a absolutely perfect pitch, no-brainer idea, and only stick with those, and your batting average will go up. You'll have less mistakes and hopefully a few more home runs as well. So the second part of today's video, and the way that I kind of look at that analogy also, is all about only focusing on businesses that I understand and only focusing on what is truly knowable. So there are a whole bunch of things in general in life and in the world that some of which we'll be able to understand and we'll be able to just know. Some things we'll either never be able to get our heads around, or they're just impossible to know. So it was very obvious to me when I first started investing that we should spend most of our time, if not all of our time, on the things that are knowable. Certain things are knowable, certain things are not. It makes no sense at all, in my mind at least, to spend time on the stuff that is not knowable. So that's why it's consistently amazing to me how much time investors spend on discussing whether they think the stock market is going to go up next month, whether they think it's going to go down next month. We've got a jobs report coming out, GDP growth is, 10 basis points off what it was expected to be, interest rates might move a slither. All of this stuff is not knowable, and although it's going to have an effect on your investments in the short term, there's no denying that. I don't think it's worth spending the time on trying to figure something out that you have zero chance of being able to figure out. That just rationally makes absolutely no sense to me. But it's exciting. People like to talk about it, and that's where the views go and where the attention goes and all that kind of stuff. So for me personally, I think you've got to focus on the things that are knowable, and in investing, that means focusing on individual companies, and more specifically, individual companies that you have the ability to understand. So for me personally, I have a background in agriculture. Part of that is a pretty strong science background as well. So those are the areas that I focus on. I understand agricultural production systems inside out, and that's where I think I have an edge over the average investor, quite a significant edge probably over the average investor. So I look at agricultural businesses, I look at basic businesses that pretty much anyone can understand. You saw me do a video analyzing Netflix. I don't think it takes too many brain cells to understand the business of Netflix personally, but there's plenty of businesses that I don't understand. I saw, for example, some of my favorite investors like Warren Buffett have a very heavy weighting in his portfolio in the financial sector. I don't understand banks that well, so I don't look at those companies. I don't spend the time looking at them. I'm sure I'll learn more about banking over time, just as I invest generally and kind of pick things up. But right now, that is not a business that's in my circle of competence. So I ignore it. There's no point in me spending a bunch of time on it if I don't think I'm going to understand it as well as I can understand Coca-Cola or Netflix, like I said. So that's the way I approach things. You've got to focus on things that are knowable, things that are squarely in your circle of competence, and that's the way you should tackle it. So taking this mentality sort of allows me to avoid getting sucked into all the hype with specific sectors and that kind of stuff. If it's really a business that I don't think I understand, or it's on the brink of circle of competence, it's an easy pass for me. And it's also pretty amazing to me how easily people suddenly get really excited about a new sector that they've never looked at before. Oil is definitely one that falls into that category at the moment. From what I've seen, everyone seems to suddenly be an expert on oil and get very excited about the various financial instruments available to invest in oil with the craziness that's been happening there. I know a little bit about oil, but I am certainly no expert on it. So, I'm sure I could probably get it into the circle of competence if I did enough work on it. But at the moment, I've got enough businesses to look into already. So that's what I'm focusing on. I have a much better chance of understanding the ones I'm already working on versus going into a whole new sector and trying to have an edge over the average investor there. And one of the things I just recently picked up yesterday on this topic from Pabrai is that I've heard him get asked a few times, circle of competence, stick to it, that's great. How do we actually know when we are outside of our circle of competence? And how do we go about expanding it? And Monish Pabrai's answer was actually pulled from Charlie Munger, and he said, is this business in my circle of competence? Basically, to ask the question is to answer it, is the way he put it. So if you're questioning yourself for a second on whether you understand the business, you probably don't, so it's a pass. That's the first thing. The second thing he mentioned is that really you shouldn't focus on expanding your circle of competence as being kind of the main goal when doing investment research. So that will happen naturally over time as you learn more and learn about more businesses, but it shouldn't be the sole focus. The sole focus should be sticking to what you currently understand, and you will kind of pick things up by osmosis on other businesses as you just learn more. So you do not need to have a massive circle of competence to do well in investing. He brings up the example of a real estate investor that has a tiny little circle of competence in one specific type of real estate and one specific part of a city, and he's become a billionaire. So, we don't have to understand every business. We certainly don't have to have an opinion on every business, which is exactly what the intro to this video was all about. So those are my thoughts on the matter, and that is hopefully going to help you guys in your investing as well. So hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, hit like, hit subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Cheers.